Star Trek. Nemesis had a moment even more disturbing than Spock's mind meld in Star Trek VI. When fans think of unsettling moments in Star Trek cinema, many immediately recall the mind meld scene in Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Spock's psychic connection with the dying Chancellor Gorkin, where he shares not just memories, but the visceral fear and trauma of another being, was haunting, intimate, and undeniably unsettling. Yet, nearly 3 decades later, Star Trek Nemesis presented a different kind of disturbance, one that pierced the psyche in a far subtler, almost insidious way. The confrontation between Captain Jean-Luc Picard and his clone, Shenzhen. On the surface, Picard versus Shenzhen is classic doppelganger storytelling. But unlike a simple evil twin trope, Nemesis transforms the encounter into a philosophical horror show. It's not just that Shenzhen mirrors Picard physically, he embodies a darker, amplified version of everything Picard has suppressed over his lifetime. In Spock's mind meld with Gorkin, the horror is external, a dying leader, a tense political landscape, and the threat of war. Picard's horror in Nemesis is internal, existential, and far more psychologically corrosive. From the moment Picard discovers Shenzhen, the audience is confronted with an eerie sense of inevitability. Here is a man who shares your DNA, your history, even your sense of morality, yet he has become a being capable of cold-blooded genocide. In essence, the film asks, what if the path you never took, the life you never lived, took over the world instead? And more terrifyingly, what if the universe treats you as identical to that path? That question lingers in every frame where Picard and Shenzhen interact, creating a kind of narrative dissonance that Spock's mind meld never attempted. One particularly disturbing sequence occurs when Shenzhen captures Picard, and, in a moment that recalls both intimacy and violation, imitates his mannerisms almost perfectly while simultaneously asserting dominance. Unlike the mind meld, which connects minds temporarily and with mutual consent, Shenzhen's psychological manipulation is coercive. He weaponizes their shared identity, turning Picard's empathy into a vulnerability. There's no exchange of feelings. There is only the forced confrontation with an alternate self that is more ruthless, more capable of violence, and, crucially, devoid of moral restraint. For viewers, this scene is more discomforting than Spock's meld because it suggests a permanent, irreversible reflection of the self that could replace you. The horror is not empathy, but erasure. Then there's the visceral horror of mortality that Nemesis injects into this dynamic. Shenzhen's plan to deploy a weapon capable of destroying all life on Earth is not just a villainous plot device. It is a mirrored existential threat to Picard's own existence. Unlike Gorkin, who is a singular entity, Shenzhen embodies potential annihilation on both personal and planetary scales. Picard's confrontation is not merely about stopping a murderer. It's about grappling with the very concept of what he might have become under different circumstances. The scene becomes almost unbearably intimate. The hero faces a version of himself that is both familiar and monstrously alien. In a way, the psychological weight surpasses the mind meld, which was brief and externally contextualized. Nemesis turns horror inward, asking viewers to imagine the nightmare of seeing themselves as the villain in their own story. Additionally, the film leverages cinematic techniques to amplify this unease. The lighting during their confrontations is stark, almost clinical, casting Picard's reflection in fragmented shadows that mirror Shenzhen's own moral fracture. Dialogue is sparse, and every line between them drips with double meaning. When Shenzhen says things that echo Picard's own philosophy, it's not comforting. It's a reminder that the line between self and other is disturbingly thin. Where Spock's mind meld is contained, controlled, and intellectual, Picard's encounters with Shenzhen are emotional, disorienting, and deeply personal. The audience is not just a witness. They are complicit in the horror, forced to reckon with the unnerving possibility that anyone, even the moral anchor of the Federation, could become a monster under the right conditions. In retrospect, this is why Nemesis resonates differently from Star Trek VI. Spock's mind meld is dramatic, tense, and unsettling, yes, but it is, in some ways, a temporary transference of fear. Nemesis delivers a permanent existential inquiry. What defines identity, morality, and destiny? It lingers long after the credits roll, haunting viewers not with the spectacle of psychic intrusion, but with the intimate terror of self-confrontation. Picard's ordeal is more disturbing because it is intimate, personal, and psychologically unescapable. Unlike Spock, Picard cannot return from the experience unchanged.